Hello there and welcome to this vlog of October 2022, and today's video is slightly earlier than usual because I don't think I'm going to get time to squeeze out a video during the week because of work commitments. So a little bit early. I also can't really hang fire on this one, which I usually would do. I'd record it and then upload it ready for Friday. But the subject that I'm going to talk about today is the next Kickstarter, or the Wave 3 Kickstarter, if you want it to call it that, with BattleTech. And it may be that they announce something tomorrow, in which case this video will then become completely out of date. So I thought instead of risking that, I'll just put it out earlier than usual. What I want to talk about, though, is the potential pitfalls that we might now have over the next few months. And obviously we've got no comms on this at all, really, from Catalyst. Well, that's not exactly fair. They have, obviously, through Gen Con photography, we do know kind of the constructions of the lances that we are getting. I've done videos on that previously, but we've had no real intel on when it's going to go live or what we can expect in terms of the Kickstarter format. You know, are they, for instance, going to do stretch goals, or are they going to keep those out just to keep it a little bit more simple? So we're going into this a little bit blind. I'll be very honest here. I really thought we would have had something last month. When we got to the last week in September, I was like, yeah, this is like 2 or 3 weeks later than I actually thought. Or at least I thought we would have got an announcement at Catalyst side saying, okay, the next Kickstarter will be live on October the 15th or something like that. But you know, outside of the almost unofficial intel that we've got, which is through things like Gen Con or through artist Patreon pages, which, you know, you can kind of piece together a lot of data from what the freelancers for Catalyst are doing. And it's all above board. You know, Catalyst obviously have to give them the green light to say that they can show a particular design off. But then, you know, through that and then through people going to Gen Con or Adepticon and taking photos of what's going on. And we've got some idea. Like I said, it's just that we're still in a little bit of a grey area when it comes to when the release will happen. And what I wanted to discuss today really was why I think that could be a potential problem. And this is more of a news video than anything else. From the international periphery of BattleTech in Britain. I think some of the American audience that watch this, although I think the recession is now really starting to kick in globally, so I'm not saying that the Americans have got it easy, but I think internationally, obviously, with what's going on in the Ukraine and the craziness that we've got over here with energy prices, Americans don't really face that because the Americans have their own energy supplies, whereas in Europe we've been very much, Central Europe, not so much Britain. I think Britain only gets about, I think it's 3 to 5% of its gas from Russia, but still a factor, and it's still obviously, you know, supply and demand works. If it's more then expensive to get gas in from the Middle East because the demand for it goes up because people don't want to deal with Russia, then, you know, that knock-on price occurs. So it's difficult. And I wanted to kind of touch on a couple of those global issues that I think will really kind of stifle the Kickstarter if you know, and that's no fault of Catalyst. Obviously, they are not the ones invading Ukraine or potentially Taiwan, which we'll go on to discuss a little bit about. But if I were in Catalyst's position, the one control mechanism that I have on this Kickstarter is timing. Everything else is pretty much in the air. I mean, they use a factory out in China to create the product. That slightly is up in the air as well for reasons that we'll talk about, but the one thing that they can try to do is at least try to get this out as quickly as possible and try to kind of get people on board with it and sign up now before certain things happen. Again, even that might not work because the way the world is at the moment, it's you know, it's that Chinese phrase about living in interesting times. We certainly do. So yeah, all a bit worrying, and I'm talking about BattleTech Kickstarter here, so worrying with a very, very tiny W. What's far more worrying is the fact that these like dystopian, horrifying governments just tend to feel it's okay now to go and invade sovereign countries. So we're going through a weird cycle again, unfortunately, which I kind of thought we'd probably seen the end of, but no, it's come back. It's starting to bite us again. Anyway, the geopolitics that I'm going to talk about here, I'm going to probably be quite, like low key on that. I'm not going to go into too much depth on it. This is a BattleTech channel, but I think it's almost interesting if you're going to sign up to the next Kickstarter. A few things that I'm going to talk about here, have that in the back of your mind and know that there may be potential issues with like delivery and especially like price scaling as well. We might see that like have to increase. So let's go into it then. I've got like 4 factors here, which again, my little thesis on why they need to do it quicker or as quick as possible. Whether it's, for 4 quite different reasons, some economic, some like geopolitical. The first one, and the really, really big one, which I've already touched on, is the situation in Southeast Asia. Now, Catalyst have gone on record previously of saying, and I've heard at least a couple of the guys at Catalyst say something along these lines. They have been asked before by like fans, why don't you get the plastics made in America? There are plastic companies here. And Catalyst are, been very forthright about it and just said, we can't do that. Like, there is no one that could do it on that scale and to that level of economy. And I'm guessing what they mean by that is as well, it's not, obviously, they can do it in America, but the price would probably just escalate to a point where it'd really start to hit into their profit margins, or even may start to become unprofitable for them, which would obviously be disastrous. So they've obviously looked into that, I think, as well, knowing that, the kind of the people that run BattleTech, it's a very American centric like personnel at the top of that, and I'm sure if they could, they would give it to a factory in Ohio. And it's not patriotism or anything like that, but it's like I just look at my own situation. Like, if I can buy British food sourced in Britain, I will do. There are many, many reasons why. I like to support my local economy. I like to, just the fact that I'm not having to get shipping in for something means that it's more environmentally friendly. So, I think a lot of people feel that way about things as well. In what is a global market now changing into something else. I mean, we really are seeing the end of the 90s globalization that we've all known for so long. It's all really changing at the moment. And I think, Catalyst will have absolutely looked into getting this done domestically, or maybe even getting it done in a way that I think could be more beneficial for them in the future, and that's to get like hubs to do it across regions. So for instance, you do have your factory in China who do it for, like the Asian like BattleTech market, because easier, or maybe in another Southeast Asian country. But then you do use to me it'd be an Eastern European country would be quite a good choice at this, somewhere like Poland, where they do have a heavy manufacturing sector. Is there anyone there that could facilitate this for the European crowd? You could then try to do it in like the Northwest. Maybe they could, if they get big enough, they can kind of go the Games Workshop route and create their own factory. That obviously, though, is a huge step and would need loads of investment. And I'm not talking the issues that I'm going to talk about here, obviously, like short term with the Kickstarter, but long term, I'm pretty sure that Catalyst will be looking in to things like that, or at least, whatever happens with the BattleTech IP, because obviously it's owned by Tops, and who are now in turn owned by Fanatics. So you may have a situation there where, if it seems profitable enough, the housing company, the bigger company, may come in and say, we'll quite happily invest like $3 million into this because we can see like long-term like financials for it. So things like that may change as like time goes on. But for now, though, I think Catalyst they've put their eggs in the China basket for legitimate reasons, like financial reasons. It's what most companies do as well. If you look at someone like Games Workshop, Games Workshop are big enough that they do have their own plastics company in Nottingham that do a lot of the like the physical product. But I believe like the vast majority of their publishing is done out of Southeast Asia, probably China. Little things. I even think like the cardboard boxes that they get made for the games is done in Southeast Asia. I think, I'm not 100% sure about that. And how it will work is then they'll presumably have like local distributors who package that up to them. I don't presume it all comes back to Nottingham and gets sorted there. They probably have a system where, you know, it's probably like famously why Australians have to pay such an extra cost for Games Workshop product, probably because there might be two shipping lines. They've got the plastics coming from Britain, and then they might have the cardboard and the printing coming from Asia. So you've got two like distribution lines going to a country that, or well, I mean, Australia's a continent, isn't it? And it's you know, a long way from most things. So that's presumably why the cost is more. Whereas in Europe, we obviously don't have that with the plastics, so they don't have to pass that cost on of shipping the plastics out, you know, thousands of miles away. So I'm sure that Catalyst have got their eye on things like this, but for this Kickstarter, unless they've been planning this for like a year, and they're going to really kind of pick something out of the hat and say, oh, we're now using local distribution centres. I'm very surprised if that happens, though. It sounds to me like the last Kickstarter was really quite profitable and done very well and efficiently on their side, so it'd be slightly risky to change that. And unfortunately now we've got these world events going on that potentially might upset this. The one in China, which is, I'm sure most people watching this will at least heard of this situation, but it's the situation with Taiwan. Taiwan is a super interesting nation. It's traditionally Chinese, you know, like going back in history, and it was then, I believe, taken over by the Japanese. Eventually got its sovereignty, and it was almost like it was the real like bulwark against like the Chinese like communism by the Americans back in, you know, the Cold War. So the Americans, I remember hearing quotes even like in the 90s by the Americans saying that like an attack on Taiwan is an attack on America, because Taiwan is very much like a capitalist, very pro-American, a little bit like South Korea, you know, like nation, a nation friendly to the US interests in that area. So the US have got a massive like investment in it. And recently, and obviously all this comes from actions with Russia. Russia invaded Ukraine like on a whim, really, without, you know, shockingly as well, if you follow that, and have caused absolute devastation. Now, we've kind of got like a proxy war there, similar to what was the case in Southeast Asia in like Vietnam, and you know, that neck of the woods like Laos, and like back in like the 50s and 60s, Korea as well, obviously, where there's almost like a proxy war going on. This time though, like the game has changed a little bit, so you've kind of got like Putin and his like cronies and the like the Russian. I mean, Russia is effectively a mafia state and has been for a long time. I don't think that's controversial to say. So the people in charge of it, are basically engaging on what I would just consider like an illegal invasion that's masquerading as some kind of like nationalistic principle. It's just theft and imperialism. Obviously, the West is massively involved now in terms of like shipping arms to the Ukrainians, but we can't intercede directly because there is the threat of nuclear war. This, just the fact that Putin did it though, and no one just, you know, that NATO didn't just like send in the troops, which I think was never going to happen anyway. It's really kind of like up to the ante in these like despotic regimes who are quite happy to go and you know, cause chaos and problems and just completely bypass international law. And China is in a very similar situation with Taiwan. You know, had it not been for the Americans, the Chinese would have annexed Taiwan decades ago. But the Americans have been very strong on that front. So very tense situation there. Now, just to be completely clear, if China does decide to invade Taiwan, all bets are off, because China is such a huge part of the global economy. They provide so, I mean, just go away and have a look at the computer that you are watching this on, or the device that you are watching this on. if the back of the product doesn't say made in China, I guarantee that tons of the components within it were made in China. So, that will be catastrophic for the world economy. We literally will rebalance anything. It will probably cause absolute chaos. And I think the West has to learn that lesson now, that we cannot be reliant on these unstable governments. I'll say that word very, very loosely, because I don't believe they are governments. There's something else entirely, which I won't mention here. I'll be polite. They are in a position we are in a position, in the Western hemisphere, where we have just allowed them to get away with this, kind of meld into our economies so much that if there is a problem, it's going to cause a catastrophic chain of problems across the supply side. So brace yourself for that if it happens. Now, again, BattleTech channel, so I'll put myself in my box, get back to that. If that happens, there is no factory plastic for BattleTech, because they will literally, I guarantee this, the Americans will impose sanctions immediately. They have to. Because where would it end? They start with Taiwan. Do they then? China have got a record in the past of invading countries like India. They've obviously have a lot of historical issues with Japan as well. The Korea, even Russia, weirdly enough. Goodness knows what might happen there. It's a very complex relationship the Chinese and the Russians have got. So what I'm saying is this: the Americans can't just hang back and be like, oh yeah, you invade Taiwan, do what you want. They'll literally say to every American company, no, you can't do business with them anymore. The shipping from that area will obviously, go the way of the dodo. So it's going to be absolute chaos if it happens. Now, if I had to say, do I think it will happen? I'm more confident it won't happen today than I was a month ago. So I'd only give it a slight percentage chance, maybe 20-25% chance that it will happen. I think a month ago I probably would have got that up to about 40-45%. The reason why I think that's decreased, though, is because of the way that Russia have completely botched this Ukrainian invasion. And I think the dander was up for these regimes back in February, March, but now China are looking at it like, we cannot afford to be pariahs like the Russians are. It's disastrous just for for brand China. And they are, they're a weird economy. I mean, it's like a hybrid capitalist economy with a communist government. It's very, very odd. But they know that the devastation that it will, in terms of just the financials of it, will be so horrific for them. Is it worth it? Is the pride worth it? And I think that the Chinese are more stable, let's say, than the current Russian regime. The Russians are basically just run by gangsters. The Chinese are run by a political party, that's still dictatorial, but I'd still put more faith in their ability to run their system logically, as opposed to the Russians, who are, goodness knows where this decision came from. It's a complete act of self-immolation. They're just destroying themselves. I don't expect Russia to be a state in 24 months. I think it'll just split up. I think there'll be massive insurrections. If you know anything about Russian history, you know that Russia is basically like Moscow and surrounding areas, or as a small nation, and they've just got away with this imperialism for years, talking about one Russia. But unfortunately, unlike the United States, which has got that loose conglomeration of a federalist system, it's in Russia, it's look at what they did in Eastern Europe. Look at Latvia or Lithuania or Hungary. These were nations that were massively oppressed. At the point of a gun, were brought into the Soviet Union. So very, very different from a democratic federal system like America, or even the European Union, which obviously there are problems with the states. But Britain just ceded from the European Union, and I don't believe there was an invasion here. So democracy and all that. But from the point of view of those kind of governments, if their dander is up, they will do more horrifying things. Or if we let them get away with it, they'll do more horrifying things. And I think Putin's going to get a very swift lesson over the next year about don't mess with the West, because we're very, very powerful and we're very technologically advanced, and there is still a grain of or a thread of, I think, that ethos within like the Western Hemisphere. I mean, I certainly have it. Like I mean, I'm British anyway, and the Brits have never ever trusted the Russians. They don't trust us either. But for me, in Europe, the Russians have always been the great enemy. Never trusted them an inch, even when they went back as this so-called democracy. I didn't trust that either, although I was only a kid at the time. But it's something where I think the world has finally woken up to what this is, and it could end up being the best thing that's ever happened for years and years. And I mean that. Obviously, I'm not talking about the war itself in Ukraine, which is just horrific, and the death toll on that is just going to be horrendous, and the damage, and it's just horrifying to see in 2022. But in terms of the long-term play, I think this will break the back of the final despotic regimes, like the final lingering smell from World War One. May finally be driven away in our lifetimes, and this might be the start of it. So, fingers crossed. Anyway, it's BattleTech channel, not geopolitics with dust counters. Anyway, so yeah, if that happens, you might as well just tear up your ticket for the Kickstarter, because I don't know what will happen, but I only give that a slight chance anyway. Again, though, I would suggest it's another reason why Catalyst should go sooner rather than later when it comes to getting the Kickstarter out, because who knows, the world is just changing so quickly at the moment. I mean, I think ever since like 2016, it's just been one thing after another. So I think if I've got a project like this going on and I can see a window for it, I'd want to do it in that window before the next dark clouds come along. The next issue that I'm going to talk about here is actually far more or far less dramatic, than the previous topic, and that's Christmas. So one of somebody on the comment section actually made this point, and I've been thinking about it as well in terms of when they're going to do the Kickstarter. If they leave it like another 6 to 8 weeks, which I just hope they don't do, they're going to have several problems with that. And I'm going to go this. In fact, what I'm going to do now is I'll meld the next point into this one, and the next point is like economic issues getting worse and worse across the globe. So we'll just tie that together with the Christmas factor. And I can only speak for Britain, but in Britain at the moment, I mean, we have just got a new Prime Minister who is, I mean, to say it's been a catastrophic disaster the first month is an understatement. I've never, frankly, seen anything like it. She's absolutely tanked. Oh, it's not just her, it's obviously the cabinet, who I refer to as the cabinet. The cabinet have tanked the pound over the last 5 to 6 weeks. So we're pretty much at like parity now with a dollar, which is just unheard of in my lifetime. Back when I was a kid, it was 60 cents to a pound. Now we're pretty much, in fact, it may have bypassed. The dollar may be worth more than a pound now. One important factor to saying that is that the American dollar is actually doing very well at the moment. I don't want to make this political because I know I've got a big audience, and I'm speaking purely as a professional services corporate bod here. I think the current regime in America have done a hell of a lot better economically than the previous regime. When I look at that objectively, again, I don't have a horse in that race, but you can see things there that have given a confidence to the American economy. I know that that's controversial to say because obviously American politics is just so brutal and black and white, but as an outsider looking in, I can see why the dollar is doing very well. And obviously we've got that, not good for me, obviously, because then the pound starts to go, backwards against it, which is obviously, as someone who, like the BattleTech fanboy that I am when I'm getting things shipped in, and I tend to kind of buy stuff with Catalyst as well, the shipping rates, which were kind of fine before because, the way that the pound was against the dollar, but now, it's starting I'm starting to see, like if I go and do like a batch order from Catalyst and it costs me $500-600, all of a sudden it actually cost me £500 or £600, whereas previously it was like £400. Now, first world problems and all that. I mean, if you can afford to buy plastic toys, then you shouldn't really be complaining about your economic situation, and I'm not. But why I'm bringing this up and tie this with a Christmas issue as well. The first is that BattleTech's got a huge international audience, and in Australia and Germany particularly, Britain as well, but I think more so Germany and Australia from what I can see of it. And I think you've got a situation there where the longer we leave this, the stronger the dollar will probably get. America is in quite a good, stable position at the moment. And Britain is not. Britain's been in flux for years, and it's only getting worse and worse because we've just got a government who are maybe like 3 or 4 years past their sell-by date, unfortunately. So hopefully we kick them out shortly and can get people in that have got new ideas. But until that time, the longer that this is left, I do see the pound becoming stronger against the dollar. Probably will be the same against the euro as well, because of the problem with the energy crisis in Europe, which I cited earlier. So your German audience and your British audience, not sure about your Australian audience. The Australian dollar always seems to be weak against most currencies, so maybe they're just used to it. But for people in like the European zone, absolutely not. And that will put a lot of people off buying the Kickstarter. And the longer that is left, I don't see the situation getting any better over the next 18 months. Unfortunately, I think we're heading for a really, really nasty recession. And again, if I'm looking at it as my window opportunity, I'd be thinking about that. Get onto the Christmas issue. So if people are going to have to tighten their belts and they've got families, are you necessarily going to sign up to a Kickstarter when you've got to just think about, buying your kids a present, and you might have to do the opportunity cost thing, buy your kids a present, not sign up to the Kickstarter? Obviously, the closer we leave that to Christmas, the more severe that's going to get, because that's if you're asking people to kind of give money in November, that's when people go and buy Christmas presents. And they might miss that window. And that's why I'm looking at the calendar now. I'm filming this on the 2nd of October. I think as soon as you get into it's quite unusual in this, but I always buy my Christmas presents in like the beginning of November. And I don't know, maybe most people leave it to the last minute. But if you are like me and you've kind of set up to buy things then, and you then have the Kickstarter come on you, that's just the extra expenditure in that month that you maybe not have been planning for or expecting. So Christmas is the issue there, definitely. And I really want, a slight, I'd want more time. If I was at their side and if I was at Catalyst's side, I'd want to give my audience more time to plan that. And I think, again, having no comms on it is slightly problematic. I mean, even if they come out this week and say, oh yeah, the Kickstarter is going to be live in 7 days, at least then people can plan for it. But at the moment, I think, if you're a major fanboy like I am and you're just desperate to get news on it, you'll be thinking, oh my goodness, can I not? Well, again, I don't have kids, so I don't have to think about this. But if I did have kids and then I had, an expensive partner or something like that, and all the other factors that come in with like family life, I'd be definitely thinking, yeah, I've got to. I might not go in at the Kerensky level of of the Kickstarter this time. I might go in a little bit lower. So that's going to kind of eat into it a little bit as well, I think. And they're really, just to surmise, they're the 4 issues that I've kind of covered. That's China, the Christmas situation, the economic issues getting worse, and also the strong dollar against other currencies. And again, I see all those 4 factors being, well, apart from China, it's slightly different, but the other 3 factors certainly are probably going to get worse than before they get better. I say that with a caveat, obviously, it's good if you're in America and you've got a strong dollar. For the main, obviously, having a weak currency can sometimes be beneficial if you are moving goods the other way, but we won't go too far into that. It's not an economic show. But yeah, to get back to it, I just desperately hope we hear something over the next 7 days. Again, I'm going to put this video out as soon as something drops. I'm going to be on that, so I'll be like, "Ooh, I'll literally, unless something crisis happens with work, I'll just film as soon as I see news on it." And I just hope that we get, like I said, I just want intel. I just want them to say, "Well, okay, we're planning to go." In a month or whatever, and at least then people can schedule it in. Slightly I just don't know what to think at the moment, because I was on Patreon a couple of days ago and I saw that Anthony Scroggins, I think he's the lead artist on the new product lines for Catalyst, He'd posted a picture of the Grizzly, which is a clan second line mech, and it's I can't guarantee this. It might not be in the next Kickstarter. I mean, who knows what they're going to do? They've got. I mean, they're doing lots of different things at the moment, right? They've got the mercenary stuff coming out. They've got Alpha Strike. They've then got the potential of the next Kickstarter. So it might be that they are doing something separate with the Grizzly. But if it is in the next Kickstarter, I was kind of going through all the lists as to where that could go, and I just couldn't see anything. Like all the second line box sets that we are getting, the box sets that have got things like the Jenna 2C, the Griffin 2C, Bane. They're all kind of accounted for, like we know what we're getting in those. So I'm like, where's this Grizzly going to go then? Are they going to bring out another second line star that we just don't know about yet? And I'm just thinking, like, this is very late in the day for new products, unless again it could be on a stretch goal or something like that. So I'm not panicking about that. I just found it slightly like interesting that was being posted now, when I would very much have expected them all to be kind of lining up the action. I'm sure they're doing this. I'm sure that they've got all the kind of Kickstarter like communications ready to go. They just have to press send. But again, if I don't think Catalyst, I think I'm slightly under their radar, but if they ever did watch this over the next 24 hours, very doubtful. I just hope we get something. Just give us something. Just tell us something. Just give it, even if it's not even a specific date. Just say, it's going to be end of October, and then at least I can just pencil that in, and I know that like it's going to be coming, and I know that then I can. There's other. I can't go into too much detail on this yet because it's not been announced, but I am going to be hopefully giving away some Kickstarters. Long story. I'm not going to go into it because it's not been formally sorted out yet, but keep an eye out for that, because I do like to give things back to the community, and I think as do quite a few of the other like YouTube channels. So I'm just, for the sake of trying to build up a little bit of buzz for it, and to try help people out that maybe can't afford to kind of go in on like the higher levels, I'll probably do something like that. So just for me selfishly, I'm like, I wish they'd tell me, just so I can kind of get the comms on it done now, ready to go, but might have to just wait a little bit on that. Anyway, I'm going to leave that here. That was Geopolitics with Mr. Dust Counters. But I hope that will, in a way, I think as a news thing, if you're watching this and something bad does happen, you might think back to this video and think, oh yeah, the world's in flux. So rather than like, go onto the Kickstarter forums and start shouting at Catalyst, you might put that seed in your mind now that this is still very, very chaotic at the moment, and it's not Catalyst's fault. I think they actually did very well on the last Kickstarter to get it out when they did, with everything due to COVID-19. That is still actually a factor as well, because China still sporadically do lockdowns, so don't rule that one out. Again, for the China situation, something else might raise its head there, which closes a factory down for a month, like what we had last time. So, yeah, like I said, just to kind of, for want of a better term, to put it in your mind that if something does go wrong, it was kind of expected, and Catalyst, I suppose if they do the Kickstarter too late, I think they'll probably deserve a little bit more heat then. But if they do it in good time, like over the next couple of weeks, if you're backing the Kickstarters, it is just a risk at that point. It's a risk with a very small R, because if Catalyst are a very honourable company, so like if anything went wrong, I'm sure they'd give people their money back or whatever. But it is what it is. Anyway, we live in these very weird and wonderful chaotic times. So on that lovely note, I'll end it there. Again, no Friday video this week. This will be released today instead of that. And hopefully, fingers crossed, the next time that I speak to you, I will have news on the Kickstarter. Anyway, I'll thank you very much for watching, and I'll hopefully catch you again next time.